professional development and conversations are those that are unscripted. Welcome back to Innovate Her, the podcast where audacity meets impact. I'm your host, Yaritza, and today's guest is a powerhouse advocate reshaping school systems one data point and heartbeat at a time. Joining us is Johnetta Moore, a national attendance strategist, equity advocate, coach, educator with more than 15 years of experience, and yes, a fitness girly. If you look at her post, she mentions that. Whether she's dissecting chronic absenteeism trends or running schools through equity audits, Johnetta brings strategy, soul, and solutions to the national stage. Join me in digging into her story, her systems, and the way she's framing what support truly looks like in today's school. Johnetta, let's kick off by sharing with everyone waiting who you are and how you're feeling today.
All right. Well, hello. Greetings, everyone. I am super excited to be here. Like you said, I've been in this education game for a long time. Actually, this is going into my 18th year. This school year will be my 18th year in working in public schools. Most of the schools that I work in are urban, or Title I schools. That has my heart. That's where the most work is needed. And it just seems like that's where I've always landed. So again, I'm really excited. Today actually is my first year business anniversary. From when I started this work, I made my first post last year, July 31st. And a lot of the things that I wanted to do, like podcasts, conferences, have just been rolling in. So I'm super excited.
Congratulations. And we got to dig deep into that, because I know once you just mentioned that, people are probably like, well, how was the transition? How good does it feel? As you said, like everything you wanted to do, you are doing it now. And, I know there are some women out there, and even young women, who want to make that shift and probably just don't know where to begin. So, we definitely have to touch on that today.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. It starts with really betting on yourself. I made a decision. I learned a lot of skills, over my years in education. And it's hard sometimes to narrow that down to one thing or one topic. So when I started my business, the main reason why I started it is because I know that a lot of schools need help and they don't know where that help is going to come from. And being in education, I was like, well, we are the ones that hold the power. Mm-hmm. So if we're going to be in the system and continue to work in the system, we have to create ways to make the system work better. So that was really why I started my business. I decided to bet on myself just by surrounding myself by other women who were starting their businesses or had already started their business. I think that's the most important thing, to get around people who are doing the same things that you are, to continue to encourage you. There was a lot of late nights because, again, I'm still working full time. So there were a lot of late nights. I had to learn how to adjust my schedule to make time for me to do my work and not just the district's work. So it took a lot of planning. It took a lot of just sitting with myself and figuring out exactly what I want to do, because there's so many different people out here talking about school, and even some people talking about attendance. But you have to decide how you want to present the information. You have to decide what information you want to present, and just get out of your way and just do it.
Oh, I love that. I think there are so many women who think this is a lot. I mean, it is deep, right? That transition, and also the mental capacity of, I've been working this 9 to 5 my entire life. Am I really equipped to go on by myself? Like, I know for myself, that was the fight that I had in my head all the time. Was I was making a lot of money. This is security, and I have a baby, but they're doing things totally different than how I would do it, right?
Right.
My mom will always say, if you have to question something, that means it's not for you. And if you're questioning it for years, it's really not for you. That obviously means you've obviously moved on, or that system for you is broken. So you find a way that you can come back to that system and fix it, but you're not going to do so by the inside. You got to take yourself out of the equation for a bit. And that was a hard pill for me to swallow. But once I started thinking like, yeah, I can do that. And yes, people were already asking me to speak on these topics. It's now like, okay, let me set myself up with a blueprint. These are the 5 goals that I'm going to have and I'm going to give myself for the first year. These are going to be the goals for the next year. What has happened? What was effective? What was ineffective? And like you said, balancing what I was willing to do for other schools and then my personal time, because I did quit. I quit. So I didn't even have a 9 to 5. I didn't have another job. It was like, one, this better work.
Right.
And two, I still have to balance my personal life because I had a baby, right? So that was for me like my second job is coming home and just the reality hit me that she's hungry, she's crying, and I still got to do this presentation at the same time.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely it's a lot of work. Another thing that I did, I got a coach. I know sometimes it may be difficult to invest, but coming like just thinking different, because the way you think about your business and the way you operate during the school day is totally different, because a lot of time when you're at school, somebody's telling you what to do, you already have your job description, everything is laid out. But when you're on your own, it's really no one telling you what to do. And what I had to realize is the business side is different. It's something that I have not done before. So I did get a coach. I worked with my coach for about 6 months one-on-one. And then I continued to work with my coach in a group setting. So again, with other women who are educators and trying to figure out how to do all the things too. So that community actually did help push a lot of the work forward, because then you have someone that can hold you accountable. You have someone that you can run ideas by, because it may not always be, your teacher bestie that you're working with, because that's your teacher bestie. That's not your business. That's not your business person, So the investment in coaching for me was really a turning point, because that really did give me a blueprint of what I needed to be focused on. And it just made things a lot easier.
I love that. I love the idea of having a coach. For me, it was my mentors. But I also see this connection between your mentioning of the importance of having a coach and being able to decipher between my teacher bestie and a person who's really going to hold me accountable, but also is not afraid to explore different perspectives, right? You don't have
Right.
to agree with me. You're my coach. You're my business coach. You're my strategist. And
Hmm.
that's honestly what you're doing with districts and schools, right? You're a coach.
Yes.
You're an educator. You are showing up. What keeps you grounded in this work? Because I know it's a lot to be able to go in and tell people like, this is what your data said.
Yes. So what keeps me grounded? Just at the center of it, it's not about me, it's not about them, it's about the students. And if the students aren't in the building, they're not learning. We're not helping them. We're actually doing them a disservice. So the idea of, I guess, my why keeps me grounded, and also just personally being able, I like to share. I like to share strategies. I like to share systems. And sometimes when you're in the work, like a lot of school leaders, teachers, counselors, when you're in the work, it's very difficult to actually see what's going on. So sometimes it may take someone from the outside coming in, actually analyzing the data, clarifying exactly what you need to work on. So when I do work with a school leader or teacher, we're not trying to solve all the problems. We're solving the biggest problem, right? And even with solving the biggest problem, you have to break it down from there. For example, if you're saying, oh, well, the 7th grade students have the lowest attendance in the building. Okay. Is it all the 7th grade students? Is it a particular group of 7th grade students? Is it just a particular class that they're missing? So I actually, get to go in and ask those specific questions to get to the root of what's going on. Another thing I would say that keeps me grounded, like you mentioned earlier, is the fitness. At the end of the day, when I've talked to all the people and did all the things, I exercise, I do yoga, I do meditation, anything that is going to allow me to pour back into me so that I can then turn around and pour back into others.
Oh, I love it. I enjoy looking at your Instagram posts, whether you are sharing out your outfits for the week, whether you're sharing out your outfit for the week, or you're literally just showing like you've been working out. I enjoy it because I guess it takes your viewers away from just assuming that all you do is work, right? You're
Right.
human. There's other things that you got to get together to make sure that your week flows the way that it's supposed to flow. So even if that's picking out all of the clothes the week, the week before or on Sunday before ahead of time, which I still struggle with. I can't even pick it out the night before because I'm so
Yeah.
indecisive that if I pick out something the night before and I wake up and say, for instance, I'm having a bad day, I no longer want to wear that dress. I want to wear some
Hmm.
slacks. I want to wear some slacks. I want to I want to put on my sneakers. Like I'm having a bad day, but when I'm
Yeah.
having a really good day, I need some sundresses. I need some skirts. I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but
Yeah, I go through that. I went through that. So it actually helps me because I'm, very ADHD. So getting up in the morning and having to decide what I'm going to wear has always been a disaster. So that's why I started ironing on Sunday. I lay the outfits out. It's no specific order. It's just these are the things that I want to wear this week. So I don't take it down to like, okay, I'm wearing this Monday, I'm wearing this Tuesday. That I keep it open,
yeah.
and I try to live by my coach. One of the things that she always says is do what you plan, not what you feel. So I've already planned to wear these clothes. They're already prepared. So this is what I'm going to do. So it kind of takes me out of it because it's already prepared. It's already laid out for me. So even if I am in my feelings and I don't feel like putting on real clothes, I still put on the clothes. And then it does make you feel better because you look good. You look professional. So you kind of, it kind of pushes me to step into that too.
Oh, do what you plan, not what you feel.
Hmm.
Okay, I got to keep that.
Yeah.
I got to keep that in my mind. I want to go deep, right? And anybody who's been viewing our show knows I began to ask questions about racial bias, just what it looks like for our students. So I definitely want to
Hmm.
go into the topic of I know that chronic absenteeism is complex. I was teaching overage undercredited students in Brooklyn. My students were ranges 16 to 21. Most of them
Okay.
weren't showing up and they were reading on a fourth grade reading level. And I had them for AP US history. So when we're talking about absenteeism, that was me for 11 years. And for me, it was okay, parent engagement was how do I integrate technology? How do I make sure that my Google Classroom is accessible at home? How do I make sure that these activities or platforms that I use are also accessible with mobile devices, right? And just trying to strategize how I would get students in the classroom with different incentives. Like I had Sunday study groups where we would do brunch on Sundays, right? I had game days. So Fridays, the kids knew we would do game days either on Fridays or Thursdays, and that's the way that we prepped for tests. So I had to really rethink how I was going to bring my kids into school without them feeling like I'm back again and all she's going to do is ask me where I've been. So how do you see racial bias showing up in ways where schools are responding to attendance issues, and also how are you working to disrupt those patterns?
So yes, let me just start there because our black and brown kids, like I said, they do have what for the schools that I work with, they have higher numbers as far as those students who are historically chronically absent, right? So what I tell people is you can't make any assumptions. You don't know why the students are missing school. And that's the first thing that a lot of educators do. We make assumptions. Oh, they're not coming to school because they don't care. Oh, they're not coming to school because their parents don't care. So that's why I ask, why are they missing school? Why are they absent? And that's about getting to the root. You have to ask the questions. You can't just say when a student comes back to school and if they've been missing school for 2 or 3 days, you can't just say where have you been?
Hello.
At home.
Can you say that again for people in the back? Can you?
They're going to say, where have you been? At home. That's it. That's all you're getting, right? Instead of, I'm so glad you're here today. I haven't seen you in a few days. Are you feeling okay? Were you sick? Was there something going on with your transportation? Did you have uniforms? So now you're asking specific questions to see why the student is missing school. Last year, well, actually 2 years ago at my school, we started doing empathy interviews. And it's literally 3 questions that the teachers ask the student. Like I said, hey, they greet them. They ask, why weren't you here? But they also have, was it transportation? Were you sick? Was it uniforms? And then they document that information into a Google form. So then we have the Google form, so we're able to go and look at the data and say, okay, 5, 6th graders were absent from school because they didn't have uniforms. Now, what can we do as a school to assist this family with the resources that they need? Mm-hmm. And then once they get the resources, let's still continue to check and see if the attendance improves. If the attendance improves, it was the uniforms. Right. If the attendance did not improve, okay, we gave you these uniforms, but you still not coming. Yeah. What's going on? So I really just try to get people to understand that you have to get to the root. And in order to get to the root, you have to have a relationship. Because if you don't have a relationship, you're never going to get to why this student is not coming to school. So get to the root, analyze that data, and then you have to empower the people at your school to get involved. Because a lot of teachers have relationships with students and can get information out of them that, maybe me as the instructional coach or the principal, they're not getting that information. So you really have to lean on like the people in your school who have these relationships and connections with our students to find out exactly what's going on. So you really just have to take the prejudice out. You have to take the judgment out, the assumptions, and ask the real questions.
Mm-hmm. And push your feelings aside.
Yes.
I've worked with so many teachers where they take what the student is going through at home or their own experiences and their reaction, mm-hmm. obviously, when they get into the classroom personally. Mm-hmm. You can't do that because we don't know what has happened last night. We don't know what happened on the way to school. And yes, the kid is late, but guess what? He showed up. He showed up. He made it. He made it. People used to ask me, well, why are you not mad that he's 5 minutes late? He made it. I drove to work.
Right.
He is walking. I don't know what happened. I don't know if he ate breakfast. I don't know anything. All I know is he made it.
Right.
Even if he didn't say good morning, he made it. He made it.
Yeah, and that's what I tell teachers. A lot of teachers that I come in contact with. Again, it's not about you. It's just not about you. Like I know, you've done your lesson plan. You created your assignments and you have your groups all set up. But what have we done to be proactive to make sure that student actually gets there? It's simple to make a phone call home and say, hey, John hasn't been here in a couple of days. Tomorrow we're working in small groups. We're covering a lot of information that I really don't want him to miss. Is it possible that he can be here tomorrow? Just making that one small phone call and setting your feelings aside may have an impact on whether that student comes to school or not. Because it is frustrating. And I know, not to say that teachers can't feel the way they feel, because I was a teacher too. And it was also frustrating for me when you have an entire lesson plan and you have 4 or 5 students who don't show up. That can disrupt the flow. That's why I try to urge people to be proactive, because if they miss one day, call. Don't wait until it's 3 days and it's a 5-alarm fire because this child has not been to school for 3 days. Let's be proactive. Another thing, just thinking about what you said about our Black and brown kids, suspensions are also something that causes attendance problems. Mm-hmm. A lot of our kids are being suspended for things that could probably be handled in the classroom, could probably be handled with a conversation, a restorative circle. Mm-hmm. So I also talk to schools about implementing those SEL strategies, because once you get the students in school, you have to keep them in school. Yeah. So how are you going to keep them in school if you're not working to engage them? And a part of that engagement is, that SEL, teaching them how to manage their emotions, how to, get along with their classmates, how to deal with the workload, because we're putting a lot, it's a lot. Even in middle school, it's a lot of work. But incorporating those SEL strategies cut down on discipline, which then cuts down on suspension. Because a lot of times when students are suspended, that doesn't mean that they're going to automatically come back to school. Oh, I've been suspended for 3 days and I'm going to just show up, say, on a Friday. No, I'll show up on Monday,
They doing now
And if it's
suspensions.
right. And if I am in trouble, sometimes I won't come to school to avoid being suspended. And if it's a situation where you're going to require my parent to come back with me after I'm suspended, I might not make it back for a few days. So it's a lot. The discipline or over discipline of our students that also has an impact on them being labeled chronically absent.
You've just shared a lot, and I know, like, I live in New York, so we're one of the largest school districts in America. So the way we handle things in New York, and I work with a lot of New York City schools now, is totally different. When I was teaching, students had to scan in, right? Students had ID cards. They scanned into each classroom, right?
Wow.
And that automatically took attendance for them. If they were late, the text message automatically went to parents on their cell phones as a text message, say Ron was 10 minutes late, or whatever the case may be. I still took the third period attendance. That was the only attendance I took for the day, but the machine itself took the attendance, and my job was 5 minutes before the bell rang to make sure that every kid had already swiped their cards, right? Mm-hmm. But we had this system in place where the parents were notified. So if you're realizing that John is absent or late 5 days a week, you received that message. Now here's my follow-up email. Hey, Miss Smith, or whatever her name is, right? Miss Smith, Miss Lopez, how you doing? Did you receive the notifications? 1, 2, is there any way that I can support, right? My follow-up was always, is there any way I could support? But because of the fact that I had young adults, some of my kids felt like they were already adulting. Yeah. What you telling? Yeah. The line was, what you telling my mother for? What are you calling my mother for? I'm here. What are you? And I'm like, you could get into a lot of trouble. Truancy in New York City is nuts, right? And I think it's because we have so many subways. So the cops are always outside. And if your kid is late to school, 9 times out of 10, they probably got approached by a police officer already. So that's what most of our Black and brown kids in New York City are facing, especially in the morning. And we would tackle attendance that way, but we also had weekly attendance meetings. And every school in New York City has an attendance teacher, right? And I know that's not common across America. I know most districts have it, but it's required for every school to have an attendance teacher where their job is solely attendance. So if you see that these 50 kids are absent or late every day, you also have to make the phone call. So the parent is receiving a phone call from them, and obviously it's the teacher's job. And I know sometimes teachers are like, the workload is just too much. But have you noticed any distinct, like, regional trends or some trends with how school leaders are engaging with attendance data, especially as it pertains to the outcomes for students of color?
Yeah, so it varies. Some school leaders I talk to are very involved as far as what's going on with attendance, checking those attendance records, communicating with the attendance team. And there are some school leaders who feel like this person is going to handle attendance, which is fine. It just depends on how the system. I know here in Baltimore City, our teachers still manually take attendance as a part of their routines, rituals, and routines when the students come in class. The system then does provide a robocall if students are absent, not necessarily late. Okay. So we don't have that piece here. So I would say some school leaders put things in place. They make attendance a part of their school culture, right? For example, you can have one school leader who may be okay with every week you have an attendance celebration to celebrate the students who had the highest attendance in the building. Mm-hmm. You have other principals who think that it's sufficient to do it quarterly. So it really just depends on your school culture. What I try to get school leaders and teachers to understand that attendance has to be a part of your school culture. Everyone in your school needs to be talking about attendance. Yep. Because I haven't ran across too many schools where attendance is not an issue, right? And what I mean by it needs to be a part of your school culture, everybody should be analyzing the data, right? Everyone should be connecting with all stakeholders. Like you said, calling parents, having those conversations with students. Some schools have community partners that they can bring in to help with various things around the school. So when I talk to a school leader and they have school partners, what are your partners doing to support attendance in your school? Because a partner shouldn't just be coming in, doing STEM camp or whatever without talking to the students in their group about attendance, without communicating with the families, because that's an extension of the school. Mm-hmm. So once you connect with all stakeholders, again, you have to empower your entire school community around attendance. What are the attendance policies? How many days can a student be absent without an excuse? Are we asking students for excuses? Mm-hmm. Some schools may not even have a procedure when students come back and have to do their makeup work. So those are all some of the things that I talk to school leaders about, as far as these are all the things that can contribute to attendance when you make attendance a part of your school culture.
Love that. I know when I was in the classroom, so I know teacher professional development days, we did things a lot different at the school where I was a teacher at. We took those days and we did home visits. And I know so many teachers that are probably watching this are like, I'm not doing no home visit. I loved it because I was from the neighborhood where most of my kids are from, right? So I knew Bed-Stuy like the back of my hand anyway, but it gave you kind of like a different perspective on how our kids were living, right? Mm-hmm. So if this kid hasn't shown up for 30 days, no problem. I'm about to see him on a PD day, right? And we would go to 5 boroughs. So the school, we would separate. Either I was being partnered with somebody from one of our CBOs, right? Those community-based organizations. So it would be a teacher, a person from the community-based organization, and one of the guidance counselors. So, in New York City, we do have large schools. And we will break up into 5 to 8 groups and everybody's going out. And the idea is that you're going to hit as many students as possible that are on that list. Mm-hmm. We have folders to give to the parents in regards to, here's the reminder of what the school day looks like. This is your child's schedule. These are all the printouts of the letters that we emailed you that you probably haven't responded to, right? And then we would engage. So I'm having conversations with parents, and some parents, I don't even teach their child, but I'm saying, hey, this is what the attendance is. Yeah. I know soon you're going to need a school letter. You're going to need a school letter soon. We're going to need your child to be there in order for you to get the school letter though, right?
Right.
Before you could do your taxes, before you could move, before you could do anything else, you need that school letter. We need to see him in class, or we need to see her in class. And I loved it because it made, like you said, attendance was the forefront. There's no way I can expect to engage anybody or to teach if my classroom is empty. There's no way. Yeah. And there's no way. Right, and there's no way we could prepare kids for, we're talking about New York, for state exams. They're absent, knowing that they can, with science, they have to complete labs. If you're absent, you're not completing those labs because it's not like we're doing redos of the labs. So there's so much that goes into attendance. And that's why, as I mentioned to you even before we started recording, I love your work. I love what you do because nothing can happen inside of a school without attendance. Even when I'm coaching administrators on data analysis and everything else, attendance comes up. If I have to do a PD about students with disability and L's, I'm still asking about attendance. I'm still asking, how do they show up? What are the conversations during parent-teacher conference? Are people being realistic, right? Or is it just about students' behavior?
Yeah, and it was funny you said something about the home visits because I've done those home visits. Jumping out the car with the school bag full of swag. Hey, how y'all doing? I've done those home visits. Sometimes, like I said, they give you a lot of insight. Sometimes you do home visits and the parents don't even know that the students aren't coming. I've had that happen. Oh, what do you mean? We're dropping him off every morning. He's not coming in the building, and it's a way we always talk about meeting parents where they are. Go meet them where they are. Every parent doesn't have a warm and cushy story about school. If you're dealing, like say, in a Title I school or urban school setting, you have parents who had very difficult time in school. Maybe they were that student who was suspended all the time or kicked out or bullied. So the school is not necessarily a safe space for all of our families.
Right.
So you have to create that for some families. Some families are easier than others. You know, some families, you blow the balloons up, you open the doors, and they're ready to dive right in. But some parents, you have to, like you said, go to meet them where they are. You know, yes, I'm going to pop up and come and do this home visit. Then we're face to face, and you know, we're able to have a conversation, and just that may make you want to come up to the school, and it may want you to engage. It could be something as simple as the greeting when families call the school.
Yep.
That builds connection.
Yep.
So yes, sometimes getting out in the community, going to those community events. You know, we have a lot of community events around our school. So sometimes, you know, I go to events, I show up at the events, I show up at the sports games, I show up at the track meets, because that's the way that you build that connection with, you know, students and families. They see you in a different light. They see you in a different setting, and it's just like, oh, okay, well, you know,
Right.
they might care a little bit, you know. So, you know, it can make a big impact. It really does.
It makes a big difference because, as you mentioned, they see you in a different light, but then they go back to saying, "All right, she cool, right?" Like was the youngest on staff. I started teaching when I was 21, and I used to have a lot of parents just be like, "Girl, you a baby," or "What you know about this?" And I remember, like, my first 5 years, I was just like, if they don't stop calling me, like, ma'am, most of these strategies is because I'm thinking about this stuff. Like, the baby is thinking about all these cool things. And I remember, like, I had parents do TikToks with their kids. And I was having, like, my first period class and my last period class was really struggling with attendance. Because obviously the kids are not coming at the beginning, and then they were leaving out early because they had jobs to go to. But I had all AP and Regents-based classes. So all of my classes ended in a state exam, whether if it was an advanced placement exam or Regents. And I was like, well, I need a fun way. And I remember, like, reaching out to every single parent, and I was like, all right, I'll give your student 5 extra points if you create a TikTok with them summing up the unit that I'm currently teaching. And I've played some of these videos during my keynote, and it was just like banging because I was just like, we're going to do karaoke. We called it, you know.
Yeah.
I used Flipgrid at that time. And I had a parent, like, he bust out his whole piano and his daughter started singing. And then I had another parent doing a TikTok dance while the student is going through the whole lesson. I had another student act like he was a student while his kid was teaching him, like, a dry erase board. And I was just thinking, look at this. For 5 points, because you know your child needed the 5 points. You said, you know, we're going to do this TikTok. But
Yeah.
I've also seen it was you're willing to engage. So now I'm going to change how I communicate with you. Now I was sending out morning messages of videos of me. It was no longer, you know, well, obviously they were still getting the stuff about attendance and being late. But before your kid was even swiping in for attendance, you already received the good morning from me. So it would be like, good morning, Miss V, this is how I feel. And I would ask parents, pick a song on how you feel. And parents would send stuff like Bruno Mars. Hey,
I love that. Yeah.
And I raised engagement. So then when I'm having those weekly Wednesday attendance meetings, I'm saying, hey, this went up by 30%. And oh, did you see, you know, Miss Tanya's video? And I would share that video with now all the staff because I also wanted them to see, yes, this parent done cursed you out yesterday because you called her for 20 times about what her son did wrong. And when he did do something right, you never told her he did something right. Right?
Right. Oh,
And
that's
balance. 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 And I didn't learn that from my students. I learned that from watching my brother go to school, where the school would constantly call and my mom would be pissed, and then my mom would start comparing him to us, to the girls.
right.
Oh, your
Right.
sisters didn't put me through this, and your sisters. And he at one point he was just like, I'm not even gonna go no more, right? And so when
Yeah.
it was like, I don't want students to feel like what I witnessed my brother go through, because all teachers did was phone home whenever he did something wrong, and when he did do stuff right, nobody bothered to call to say, hey, this is what Raul did right, you know?
Yeah. And that's important too. I tell teachers, your first contact should always be something positive.
Yeah.
You know,
Yep.
that's also why you need to make that contact early in the school year, when everything is going good, outfits are still fresh and everything, go ahead and make that connection then, and then make positive connections often. So when I do have to call you and talk about something a little bit more challenging, then the foundation is already set, you know. And I love what you said about the TikToks, you know, because that's what they're into, you know. And sometimes, you know, we don't like to make school attractive, you know, to kids, but unfortunately we have to, because everything else in the world is, you know, it's right at their fingertips. They can see anything that they want to see in the whole wide world. And then you want me to sit in here and listen to this dry lesson?
And then
No.
look at that text. And look at that textbook you done had for 10 years.
Do that. You know, can you put some slides up? Can you make a few things jump around for me? You know, just something. And I just like to tell people, we have all the information sitting in front of us. We have the students. Ask the students, how do you want to learn? You know, get feedback from your students. I had some teachers last year, they gave their students surveys during the middle of the year, just to ask them, you know, how are things going? What are some things that I need to change? You know, what do you need to see more of? So the students have a voice in how they want to learn. You know, they become your partners. Because if you tell me how you want to learn and I create that space and opportunity for you, then the expectation is we're going to learn because you told me this is how you like to learn.
Yeah.
So here you go. I'm also an advocate of, you know, various assessments. You know, if like students, I believe that students should have a choice sometimes in how they're assessed. It doesn't always have to be paper, pencil. You know, can I make a TikTok? Can I make a PowerPoint? Can I get up and present the information to the class? Right. We want everything to be so rigid, and then it's like, well, I don't know why they're not. What do you mean?
Right.
Because it's too rigid. Because then as adults, we don't like, you know, we want differentiation in PDs. You know, we don't want to, if I've been teaching for 18 years, I don't want to sit in a PD with a first year teacher because I don't need to hear that stuff. So if we want differentiated PDs, if we want our principals to give us flexibility and not micromanage us, we should provide those same opportunities for our students, because that's what's going to build engagement. Because again, they can come in the building, but if they come in the building and it's dry and it's boring, I'm not going to keep coming back.
Right.
And just, you know, a lot of people say it's the pandemic. It could just be with everything going on in education. Like, education is not viewed as the end all and save all like it used to be.
Yeah.
So we have to do a little bit more sometimes to, like I said, make school attractive.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's standing in the way because, you know, some people believe we shouldn't have to do all that. They should just come. It's free. It's their education. We know. Right. But can we just do this and see if they'll come? You know, can we just do this and see if it will make a difference? Because what we're doing is not working.
It's not working. It hasn't been working for years. And that's the problem, right? We're constantly, as educators, when we sit through PD and we've heard the same thing 3 years in a row, we're the first ones to say, I heard this already. Can we try something different? I've heard so many educators this year say, what's the new thing now? We don't like icebreakers, right? Yeah. I need it because I don't like icebreakers either, because I'm tired of saying, this is my name, this is my favorite color, this is my hobby. I get tired of that too. But then what's the alternative? If a presenter takes that out, what would you rather do, right? Because you're going to always find something that you dislike, but until that presenter asks you, what is it you want to do, you're not going to be satisfied. And that's how it keeps.
Right.
Like you said, ask the kids, what do they want to do? And you may not agree with it, but you can find some flexibility where you're saying, okay, I don't agree with all of it, but let me do some of it, and then we'll remix it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, you can give them choices. Okay. Choose some of these 3, you know, and they can be all your choices, but it's just the idea that you're presenting it to them and you're allowing them to have a voice.
Yeah.
And I say sometimes that makes all the difference, because, okay, well, yeah, she an adult. I mean, she all right. She listen to us, you know, so it's like, okay, you know, I may come see what's going on, you know. You never know.
You never know. You never know. Well, thank you. I know listen, our conversation has been so good that we already went over time, but I need to play this rapid fire game with you because it's only right that we end this way. So I'll present 2 attendance strategies to you, right? Okay. And then you have to choose which one you'd rather do but you have to explain it in your own way in like 15 seconds or less as to why you would choose that. You ready?
Okay.
Okay. Would you rather redesign the school's morning routine or its parent engagement strategy?
I'll say, just for this, we'll pick morning routine.
Not just for this, and you only got 15 seconds to explain why.
Okay, so I would say I will do the morning routine strategy. Why is because I feel like when students come into school, they need to be greeted. They need to be greeted by not just one or a lot of members of staff if they're not able to, if they're not in classrooms. So what I would do, I would have most of my leadership staff out on the front, greeting kids, speaking to parents, engaging with them when they come into the school, because that way they already feel welcome. And then I will also make sure that my teachers are at the doors ready to receive students. And when they come in, they immediately have some type of engagement, maybe an attendance question or a question of the day up on the board and ready to go. So we're all in, we all feel welcome, we all feel cozy, and we're ready to get right to work. So it just sets the tone for the day.
I love that. When I was an assistant principal, we did morning circles. So 10 minutes before class actually began, everyone from the school, we would all meet up at the middle of the school and we would give a rundown so that students knew what to expect. If we had somebody coming into the building, they knew that already. Our students were as greedy as I am, so I would tell them what's on the menu from the cafeteria. But they already knew what to expect. So even if we began to do observations, they knew somebody was coming around to go into classes so that they won't feel
I
like,
love
oh,
that.
somebody's here. And with that every single morning. So the staff knew to expect that. They knew I'm taking away at least 5 minutes from your first period class because we have to ground our students. That way everybody can be chill, we're playing music, and now go to class. So I love that.
I love
The
that.
idea
Yeah.
that you're going to have staff.
I like that idea too. I like your idea too.
All right. Would you rather host a TikTok challenge to boost attendance or co-lead a community town hall?
Co-lead a community town hall. I say co-lead a community town hall because I am still a firm believer in it takes a village. And a lot of times schools and communities are not connected, and they should be. They operate as if they're separate entities, but they're not, because the community is important. They can pour into the school. They can give the school ideas that you haven't even thought about. You can form those partnerships. We have a lot of community members that own businesses. All over the country, you have community members who own businesses. So being able to co-facilitate a town hall, that would give me the opportunity to talk with the community, to see what the community needs, see what resources they need, see if there are any opportunities, any training opportunities for them to come into the school or for us to train them. So I think that would just be a good source of information by facilitating it.
I agree. All right, this is the last one. Would you rather drop into homerooms for surprise shout outs or would you launch a student led attendance committee?
We're gonna do pop in, just because I like to pop into classrooms. I like to pop in. I like to get the students excited. I like to get the teachers excited. I encourage that to school leaders because they need to see us excited. They need to see us happy and engaging with them and not always disciplining and telling them what to do. And no matter what the age, kids are kids. And they still like to get excited about something. You can go in and hand out a popsicle to everybody, and that's a big deal, but it's just a popsicle. So it's definitely going into the classroom, engaging with teachers, engaging with students for me.
Well, we're to the end, but I have to close this out the only way I know, and that's to ask you, what advice do you have for other women of color navigating leadership roles in data heavy spaces?
I will say, be authentic, be you. A lot of women, we're put in spaces where we think that we have to conform or be a certain way, or that our voice is not important, and that's all a lie. If you are in that space, you should be yourself. You should always speak your truth, speak with clarity, ask questions, contribute, because your ideas are sometimes the best ideas, and don't allow yourself to shrink just because of others or opposition. Sometimes you have to face opposition head on when you are a Black woman in leadership. You have to be ready sometimes to be 10 tones down for what you believe in, and just not be so easily swayed. And lastly, they don't all have to like you, but they will respect you.
Yes. Oh my God. Well, thank you for spending today with me. This one
Yeah, thank
hour.
you. I've enjoyed it. This was nice.
Y'all tune in. Make sure you follow. Where can they follow you?
At More Learning on Instagram. It's Johnetta Moore on LinkedIn. Please make sure you follow. I got a lot of resources, free resources for now. So go ahead and take advantage of that. Free resources in my bio. I have a teacher buy-in checklist. I have communication templates that are available for download. And if you have an attendance challenge at your school, you can definitely reach out to me so we can help solve it together.
And even if you don't have an attendance challenge, because something that Janetta said was we got to be proactive, right? It's about being proactive, not
Absolutely.
reactive. So even if you don't, we got to stay on top of these things all the time. But thank you so much for joining me today. And thank
Thank
y'all
you.
for tuning in. Bye.